about using wood chips and leaves. And while there's a lot of discussion about why you should use it, why you shouldn't use it, how much to use, for what purposes, yada, 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 um, one of the primary questions that seems to come up a lot when somebody decides they want to give it a try or they want to get into it, heavy duty, how to source them. Where do you get them from? Well, that's like everything else. The correct answer to every question is always, it depends. Now, I'm going to be speaking from my own personal experience. I lived in a little town called Marion, over close to Memphis. I've been there, I don't know, 15, 20 years, something like that. And I'm in the process of moving to some more rural property about an hour away from there. But I was there for quite a while, and I'm going to show you a few of the pictures that from gardens that I have done the last, I don't know, not so much last year, but the year before. I was on my third year of doing a community garden. I also had access to 3 acres on a handshake deal. I had with somebody. I didn't have to pay anything. All she asked was keep it neat. You can grow whatever you want, but just keep it neat and keep it mowed and stuff like that. So it was a nice little experimental plot out there. I tried a few things, and then I had my home garden. The picture you can see up there, if you'll look over to the right over here, you got my red car, and we're in the middle of town. You see all this brown. Now, I will take pretty much all the leaves and all the wood chips I can get. I will use either one of them for mulch. Obviously, I'll put the leaves a lot deeper than I will the wood chips just because they're lighter. And if I'm using the leaves as a mulch, I'll put out a spread and then I'll run over it with a lawnmower, whether it's a push mower, riding mower, whatever. I'll run over it 2 or 3 times and just try to shred the bejesus out of it, okay, until it's almost gone. Then I'll put another layer, and I'll just keep doing that until either I run out of leaves, or even though it's completely shredded up, I'm just bogging the mower down. It's just too deep. And that's how deep I'll go. I don't shoot for a certain depth. I just however much I can shred up. If it's wood chips, then obviously I don't have to or need to do that. It probably wouldn't be good for the mower, but depending on the purpose, I'll put it down 2 to 4 inches or whatever. Now the leaves are going to break down a little bit faster, and I will use that definitely more in compost. I'll use it when I'm trying to build soil, things of that nature. So to me, it's more of a soil food web feeder, quicker feeder than wood chips. So I will use that either as compost material or as a mulch if that's what I have. Now, especially within the garden beds themselves. Now, within pathways and stuff, I definitely use the heavier wood chips. If I'm doing a pathway, if I have it, I'll put down cardboard, and then I'll put a good 2 to 4 inches or more of wood chips over that to help hold the cardboard down, help smother out some weeds and stuff like that, because it breaks down a lot slower. If the wood chips have been chipped up very well, they're pretty fine, then I'll also use that in compost as well. I try not to use big chips in the compost unless I know it's going to be sitting there for a year or two. And I will use either one also in the chicken coop. So I'll put that in the chicken run, not so much in the coop, but in the run for a deep bedding. And I may go a foot deep. If I get a chance to do a change out and I got enough of the material, I may put that in the chicken coop and use that as for 6 months to a year if it's deep enough, for the chickens just to keep their feet dry and poop into that and turn that into compost for me. My chicken run is covered. It's actually a metal carport, so it keeps it nice and dry for them. But I mean, you can see the quantities here, and this is, this was not unusual. Probably a third of the year, the front of the community garden would look like this, and you can't even see over here to the side. So it's not unusual at all for me to have this. There's actually a little driveway right here, and you can see me pulled in, and there's a driveway long enough for 2 normal vehicles, nose to tail, and then one to the side. So it's actually a 3-car driveway, and it's not unusual at all for that to be completely full, as high as you see it, with wood chips and or leaves, usually wood chips because they're a little bit heavier, and they pull in and dump um, onto that. This is just some of the greens that we had going there. And again, you can see that same pile. Here's another pile. So I had an agreement either with the city for leaves or with a couple of land tree trimming services that as long as they're not going to, as long as it's not so wet they're going to cause horrible ruts or anything, anytime they had the space and could pull in there, they could drop it off. If there was room and they could get in and out without getting stuck or making ruts, dump it. I will use it. And all of this was spread out by hand, with a basically a pitchfork and a wheelbarrow or a little trailer behind a lawn tractor. And it looked like this a lot of the year because that's how much material, if I would put maybe both of these out, this is maybe a load and a half, I'd spread that in a day by hand by myself, and within a week I'd probably have another one. So, I mean, when I'm talking about how I was able to get the wood chips and the volume that I was able to get, this is what I'm basing it on. This is just one garden. I might have anywhere from 1 to 3 loads at my house, which is only 2 or 3 blocks from here as well. They also knew where I lived, and right there next to the road, as long as they didn't block traffic or cause a hazard. If there was room to dump it beside my fence, dump it. And then if you kind of go down this street, hop across the road tracks, and go about 4 blocks, was the 3-acre one, and had lots of, 3 acres. I had tons of room. And over the course of a year, I might get 15, 20 loads of wood chips over there as well. So, I'm talking 20 to 50 loads between wood chips and leaves a year that I was able to get. Now, just kind of curious what else I've got here. So you see these beds. Now, these beds, we did not bring any soil in. Okay, and these are some of the later beds that we did. We didn't bring any soil in. You see how these are probably 2x6s or 2x8s. So that's how deep they are, and they are filled with either already composted down 1 or 2 year old wood chips, or actually most of these two at least, just had leaves, wood chips. Whenever we would pull any other weeds or any crops that had already been harvested, we'd lay all that in there. Sometimes if I was mowing, I might rake some of that up, put in there. Just anything that would rot went in here. You see how deep that I'm putting even leaves right there. Let's see if I can look over here. So again, this is how I moved them. So you've got 1 load there, 2, 3, 4, 5. You got like 5 loads, this concrete underneath this. And this is how I would load it. I would spend half a day or more just out there with the radio going and just getting some exercise. Now, I told you we filled those beds up with wood chips and stuff. This is what it turned into within a couple of years. There is no soil that's been brought in here. This was just a box built on top of the soil, filled with, and I think this one was initially filled with about a year to a year and a half old wood chips that had just been piled up someplace and turned a couple of times. And then we just kept adding leaves. We kept adding more of really fine wood chips, compost if we had it made, and growing stuff in it. And so this is about 2 years of that, made this much new soil. And you see all these little tracks here, those worm tracks, okay? That's how many worms were in there. Little class that I was giving to some Cub Scouts. Now, how to get them. Now that was, first of all, let's talk about what you're looking for. When you're looking for wood chips, when you follow what I'm fixing to say, and these aren't, commands, these are just suggestions, what's worked for me. Do not accept a load, or do not contact them and say you want some, because they may dump them when you're not there, unless you can look in the back of the truck and see how their chipper is operating. Is it the blade sharp? Is the gap set? Is it well maintained? Because how they sharpen and maintain and set the chipper determines the chip sizes. I got a load once or twice from the city. Now, I'll take leaves all day from the city. It's kind of hard to screw that up. It's just basically a leaf sucker, one of those leaf vacs that throws it into a trailer. And in the process of the impellers creating the vacuum to suck it up, it does some shredding. And I can always shred them even more with a lawnmower. Don't have a problem with that. Only problem I ever had was occasionally they would suck up trash, and by me moving stuff by hand, a lot of times I could get some of those cans and baggies and stuff out. But when it comes to the wood, they had a wood chipper as well. They drive around, people leave limbs out by the side of, in their front yard by the side of the road and stuff. They pick it up and run it through there. But they didn't sharpen the blades. They didn't maintain the gap and all that. And what you had was not wood chips, but just beat up limbs and twigs. And yes, it's still organic. Yes, it will still break down, but it's not what you want in a pathway. It's definitely not what you want in a compost pile. And it's very difficult to move. I mean, you get a truckload of just beat up limbs, you have to do that by hand. You can't use a pitchfork or anything. You really can't move that unless it's literally by hand, piece by piece, or maybe if you got access to a loader or something, and that's going to make a lot of ruts where you're going to be using it. So you need to actually look at what's coming out of the chipper, and this is about what you want to look at. Now this, to my eye, this is not one of my photos, one I found on the net. It looks like some that somebody has already spread out, and it's been through some rains, it's been outside, because all the really fine stuff is already down through there. It's either that or it's been sifted in some way, and the fine stuff is gone, and this is the bigger chunks. But this is about the size you're wanting. And like this chip right here, I would assume that would be about, from this end to that end, might be about the width of your thumb, something in that nature. So you're wanting half a finger, something that if you took a manure fork kind of pitchfork, not the really big wide ones, but the little four-tong, some people call a manure fork or a thing, you'd be able to pick that up and be able to move it. And I find the forks better than a shovel for moving this kind of material. So you're looking for that. First of all, is it what you're going to be able to use? Now, some people will have talked about chip drop, and I've been signed up with it on and off for probably 8 years, 10 years. I've never got a single load from chip drop, and this is in an urban suburban area. Okay, some people have had some success. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody that had more than 1 or 2 loads. So what I do is when I'm driving around, or maybe I've got some people in the neighborhood, I say, hey, if you see tree trimmers, if you see a truck with one of these big machines, stop and talk to them. Don't get in their way when they're working. So when they're really working and stuff, don't walk up next to the machine. What I do is I catch them either when they're setting up, breaking down, or best yet, when they're on a lunch break. Because, they're working on a job outside in the hot. They've got to take a certain number of breaks. They got to take a lunch break, and they typically don't break all of this down to go drive some, 10, 15 minutes to a fast food place. They usually just shut everything down, find a shady spot, at least in my area, and have their lunch. Now, this might be an actual commercial area tree service. It's somebody's called them. They've got a tree in their yard, came down in the storm. They want a tree taken down or whatever, and they happen to have one of these, and they're just doing it in that way. Or it may be the Energy. Entergy is the one we use, the main power company in this area, but it's whoever the power company is that maintains the telephone poles. Every 2 to 3 years, they tend to go through there, and everybody has seen this that owns property around power poles, and they trim back the limbs and stuff to get them away from the power lines, so that there's less likelihood of them coming in contact and either sucking power off, having line losses, or in a storm or something like that, coming down and taking the line down and causing an outage. Now, even if it is the power company doing this, a lot of times, again, in my area, it's not Entergy themselves doing it. They are hiring it out to one of any number of local or national services, like Asplund or something like that. And again, in my area, typically It may be crews, and most of the actual workers may be from Mexico, South America, or something of that nature. So what I would do is I'd keep my eyes out for evidence that they're in the area. And then when I know they're in the area, I would literally go driving around looking for them, trying to catch them on a lunch break. And then I would walk up there and talk to them. Maybe I'd give them some cold sodas and maybe a dozen hard-boiled eggs, something to add to their lunch, some kind of a snack, some kind of a drink, basically a gift. Give them something. And I might do that 2 or 3 times. First time I do that, I'm just introducing myself, talking to them, see whoever the crew chief is, tell them what I'm looking for, and if possible, go look in the truck and see what the material looks like. If the material is what I'm looking for, I know the machine is being maintained and everything well, then I will let them know, and I might even have a map. So I might have printed out a map with my address, an X mark on it or something, my name and my phone number on it, or email address, and say, hey guys, I know y'all have to dump this stuff someplace. You're in my area, you're within a few blocks or small town or whatever. Here is a place that you can dump. Now, make sure if you're going to do this, that it is a place where they can get in and out easily and quickly without causing a traffic jam, getting stuck, or any other kind of hazard. Because what they'll have to do is they need to pull up there, usually pulling, depending on how far away they are, they may pull up there with this chipper in the back, disconnect it, have to be able to disconnect it someplace it's not going to be a traffic hazard, it's not going to be in danger of getting hurt and damage. Then they take the truck and they need to be able to access where you want it dumped and then be able to tilt the bed up and dump it. This truck where it is right there, it's kind of hard to tell from the perspective, but if he was over to the right very much, he probably would not want to dump there because when he picks up his bed, it could come in contact with those lower lines. Now, those low lines are typically going to be internet, fiber optic, cable television, things like that. They're not going to be an energized power one, but they still don't want to have the bed come in contact with any kind of lines just to avoid any danger or any risk or anything. So find them, butter them up a little bit with some good snacks or something like that. Look at the chips, make sure that they're actually chipped small enough that you can move them with a pitchfork and stuff like that. And then let them know what you're wanting, that you don't have to be there. It's great if you are. If you actually can, I would suggest it. But, make sure they know where you can put it. It's easy to get to. They're not going to get stuck. They're not going to create a hazard or be in a hazard themselves, and give it a try. Now, it took me probably, I could get maybe 1 load a year with this, maybe 2 if I was lucky. And then finally, I think I saw a crew on my street taking a tree down from somebody, and I approached them not for wood chips, but for some actual logs. So I was needing a couple of logs for something for the community garden or whatever, and they were able to use their Bobcat to load it onto my trailer. And again, that's something they've got to dispose of, and depending on where they're disposing of it, they're either having to pay a fee to dump it, or at minimum, they're having to drive to the other side of town. And in our case, at one point, they were having to drive halfway across the county. So imagine you're on the job here. You've got enough material that if it's chipped up, will fill this truck up twice. So when it gets filled up once, you have to disconnect from the chipper. Then you take this truck, drive half a county away, dump it, possibly pay a fee, come all the way back, hook up, and complete the job to do it again. Well, if they can dump that within 2 or 3 blocks or within a mile, it saves them time, it saves them money, it saves them fuel, it saves them wear and tear on the truck, and they can get back on the job, get it completed, get home to their families. So it's a benefit to them. But again, I'm going to stress this over and over and over. Make sure that where you want it dumped, they can get to whenever they are able to. They're not going to get stuck. They're not going to create a hazard. They're not going to be in a hazardous situation. Give them a map. Give them your name, your number, maybe your email address. So there was a company that was from Memphis but came over to Marion quite often doing stuff. And once they realized who I was, where I was, what I was looking for, and that I was very, we had built a rapport, it got to the point that between those 3 gardens, they knew they could dump anytime. They knew what I was looking for. And within the next 2 years after establishing that relationship, I might go 2 or 3 months and not get anything, and then I might get 5 loads in a week. A truck this size, 5 loads in a week. And actually, when it got to the point that I knew I was going to be moving and I was shutting those gardens down, it took 2 or 3 contacts to get through to them. No more, no moss, no more, because that was part of their business plan, their standard operating when they were in the Marion area. They knew where they could dump. So, but this is the thing that you're looking for. Another thing to consider, and I haven't had as much success with this. I'm not even sure I've really had any success with this, but similar to chip drop, sometimes your local power company might have need-free wood chips, so you can actually call them or email them and get on their list of, being able to drop. Now, the concern about this one is if you're on their list, similar to chip drop, you give them the information and stuff, they may dump a load and you may not even know it's coming, and they dump it, which is great as long as it meets your criteria, it's chipped up well and stuff. What happens if they dump a load and it's those beat up limbs that you can't do a whole lot with? Well, you're stuck with it. You got to find a way to use it or do something with it. So there's a little bit of a risk there. I like finding the crew, finding the machine, talking to them, probably their boss, either their crew chief or even the central office if need be. But this way I know what I'm getting. But again, if they're actively working, the machine is running and they're actively working, do not approach them. If anything, maybe get up close to the truck and see if you can catch the eye. There's going to be somebody who's going to be like a boss or a crew chief and try to talk to them, but do not approach the actual crew or the machine when it's running. Hopefully this has been of some help. If you've got any questions, got any suggestions or other observations, just let me know. One last little note, if some people get really concerned about what kind of wood, true. I mean, I would love to be able to say, I'll take loads, but I don't want any black walnut. Okay. First of all, the likelihood that it's going to be a whole load or 50% of that load is going to be black walnut is pretty low, unless, you see them actually taking a tree down and it's a substantial tree. But over time, it's going to average out. But even then, I would probably rather have a load of black walnut than have no loads at all, because if I want to put it in a pathway that I know it's going to be a permanent pathway, I'll use that there if I know that's what it is, because it's going to be weed inhibitory there. Granted, it could inhibit a little bit of whatever's in the raised beds and next to it, but it's going to break down. And if I mix it in with a bunch of other stuff, it's going to dilute it down, and I think I'm going to be able to overpower any of the juglone that's in that black walnut with a lot of other goodness. Or just, if I see there's a problem, then I'll just plant things in those adjacent beds that are less susceptible to the juglone. So just a thought.